Welcome to the London Horror Movie Club. I'm horror writer Lauren Jane Barnett.
And I'm Chris Sapikowski, Lauren's older brother, and I've been watching horror movies since I was 8.
Join us as we talk about the wild, weird, and wonderful horror films set in England's eerie capital.
Welcome, everyone. You're on the latest episode of London Horror Movie Club, and today Chris and I are joined by a guest who makes horror fans' dreams come true. He's the man behind the internationally beloved Weekend of the Dead in Manchester. It's the only weekend dedicated to George Romero's movies, but more than that, it's the one where you actually really get to know and hang out with the guests. I had an amazing time last year. I get to sing happy birthday to Tom Savini. I've ended up email pen pals with Jim Crut, who's known as a helicopter zombie. It's an experience like no other. There's nothing like Weekend of the Dead, and there's no one more passionate or savvy than our guest, Marcus Lewis. Thank you so much for joining us, Marcus.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And you summarized it so well there.
Oh, thank you. I hope you did it justice. I'm going to start basically by taking you back. I know it started in 2015. I know it wasn't called Weekend of the Dead then, but how do you start something that ends up like this?
Well, I mean, I've been asked the question quite a lot, and what I found with it was that there was a lot of Facebook groups in America, mainly dedicated to George Romero's films, and there was nothing here in the UK. And there was a sprinkling of a couple of horror conventions, mainly in London, like London Film Comic Con and something like that. And they did have horror guests coming in, but it was very rare to see any George Romero guests coming in. And so I stumbled across a couple of conventions in Germany, in particular, one called I think it's called Weekend of Horrors. And I started to meet some George Romero people, and that was really exciting. So that was people like Laurie Cardille, Joe Pilato, we met out there, Jim Crut, I met out there for the first time, Leonard Lees, Kyra Shern, the list went on. There must have been at least 15, maybe 20 different guests over a 4 or 5 year period that this particular show was bringing in. But there was nothing in the UK, absolutely nothing. And I remember a guy starting up a group after an event had been announced in America. And I think his opinion was, "Oh God, I'm fed up with this. I'm going to start a UK Dawn of the Dead group, and we are going to try and somehow raise some money somehow and try and get some interest and get an event out in the UK." And his idea brought me in, and I brought a couple of others because I'd met a number of people. You know, you post on Facebook, don't you? Here, I've met this person, and he knew that I'd had some contacts with these guys in Germany, and but not long after sort of starting the group, and this group got started just over 9 years ago. I think it was around my birthday. I think it was March 2015. And then by May 21st or something of that year, he left the group. He'd become a little bit disillusioned. There was only about 100 fans. If you think about the group today, the group's got nearly 2,000 fans in it. Back then, it had 100. And so it didn't have, there wasn't much gained, there wasn't much lost. And I had a friend of mine contact me and say, "Look, take this group on, let's see what we can do." And I remember my wife back then even going, "No, don't want to do this." So I kind of got involved by accident more than anything else. Because Joe Pilato in Germany, when I got to meet him, he'd said to me, do a show in the UK, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm a fireman. I'm not a promoter. I have no experience." But it sat in the back of my mind, and you look around the event in Germany. I thought, I wonder what would it take to do something like this, but be more specific to what I really love, because a horror convention is just a horror convention. If you drill it down to something more specific, whether it be John Carpenter and Halloween and things like that, or something like what we were doing, that would take a little bit more work. And I wasn't confident at the beginning that anything like that could work.
Wow.
It's interesting. When you going along that your first conference, your first con, like, were you worried that like people were going to show up, or is it you knew like guests were going to show up, or like fans were going to show up because of the Facebook groups? Like, did you have any kind of feedback on there? Were you kind of sitting with, your
God, Chris,
thoughts thinking, oh God?
I have that feeling even today, oh God, please just turn up. Yeah, I mean, obviously, moving on from that 2015 show, I reached out to a number of people because I saw the numbers for some particular reason dwindle away, and I didn't understand why. And I reached out to a few people, and they said, "Oh, wasn't really going. It didn't look like it was going to go anywhere." So I encouraged a number of people back, people that are still with us to this very, very day. I remember specifically the guy I run the event with now, Dave Berman, and Mark Burns, who was another guy I contacted. And I think Mark had actually left. And I said, look, why did you leave? Would you come back? And they all did, And so, yeah, numbers wise, I was always very nervous about it. And so, because my first horror convention experience, because I'm not a big convention goer, was in 2007. There was it was called Foray Fest in Leeds. I think it was Leeds. Two young lads had got Ken in, and they called it Foray Fest, and they sold tickets on eBay. I stumbled across it, and I got to meet Ken, and I look ridiculous next to him as he's 6 foot something and I'm 5 foot nothing. He was such a warm character, but trying to draw him to talk about Dawn of the Dead was tough, but that's another story. So when we were starting with Weekend of the Dead, we obviously you touched on it, Lauren, earlier on, that Weekend of the Dead wasn't called Weekend of the Dead in 2015. It was called Talking with the Dead UK TV, which is a bit of a mouthful, hence it got swapped. But the reason it was called that to start with was when you're looking to do an event like Weekend of the Dead, you can't, unless you're a millionaire or whatever, or at least very well off, you can't just go, boom, there you go, it's here, it's ready to go. You have to think about how can you build those numbers up to respectable numbers in the group? How can you reach more people? How can we generate some money? What can we do? So that very first stage was making a GoFundMe page, which people donated some T-shirts, books, sometimes a little, £10, £20, and we were able to pull enough money together to start that very first event and we picked on Manchester because the original guy that pulled this together wanted it in Manchester. I didn't particularly want. I don't live in Manchester. I don't live anywhere near it. I'm about 3 hours away from it. But his initial thoughts was, why are all the horror conventions in London? Why is it always in London? Why can't it be in the north? And at that time, there wasn't. He was right. There was nothing up north. So I thought, okay, well, let's leave it in Manchester. And when you look at the map of England, Manchester, although it's not dead central, it's central enough that if you're coming from Wales, it's not too bad. If you're coming from Scotland, if you're coming from the south, it's central enough. But when we got that first event together, we had literally organised it within start to finish 3 months, and that makes me feel physically sick to my stomach today because we normally need 9 months to a year to plan an event, just because of the logistics of it. And so that first event was just terrible. But everybody that came to it, which I think there was about 80 people turned up, was it was magic. I got goosebumps talking about it because it was a room full of people that loved the same thing, a real spit and sawdust venue, which I don't know if Americans know what spit and sawdust venue mean. It just literally it was like a thrown together. It was a movie room bar that you had to be there in a certain time. You had to be out in a certain time. It had a certain aroma to it. And it was just pure magic. It was just it was a special, we didn't realize how special it was until we had stopped, got our breath, didn't kill each other, and we had a little bit of money left over, and we were like, we can do this. We can really do it. So yeah, I'm even to this day, numbers for people to turn up to an event. I'm always worried about numbers because without the fans, you can have as much money as you want. You can have as many guests as you want. If the fans won't back you, then you don't have an event. And
Right.
they are the most, I've always said the guests are the most important. But I think as time goes by, the fans are becoming more and more important. Now that they have more choice, there's a lot more events on in the UK now. Then it's getting harder to get them to commit to you.
Does the event space in Manchester, has that changed since you started? You said there was nothing up north, and then you guys were kind of like the first one. Has that changed over the last 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, immensely. I mean, when we started, there was nothing, and I mean nothing. And then all of a sudden, the same year that we started, there was an event called Sheffield HorrorCon that started, and run by two really lovely ladies. And I think if I knew then what I know now, I'm not even sure I would have started Weekend of the Dead. I think I would have backed those
Interesting.
ladies and just said, play. And they are horror fans. They are proper horror fans. Those ladies, they they would have certainly would have brought in the guests that we would have wanted. And in fact, that particular year, they brought in Tom Savini and Ken Foray, two big names in the George Romero family. Um, but over the years, I've got to know the two ladies. In fact, I visited the show for the very first time last year, and I got to meet them. And they've been so respectful that they realise that the horror genre is massive for them, so they can pick anybody from anywhere, and they know that we just do George Romero, and so they don't really invite any Romero guests because they know Weekend of the Dead is specifically for it, and it's in the same area. Um, but yeah, from that point, then there's been several others that have sprung up in the UK, very big ones as well, and they can cause us some headaches on the fact that it's fans these days are having to budget. We've been through the COVID period, which was difficult for everybody. When fans came back out to go to horror conventions, the issues they were finding was that some of them had lost jobs, some of them had lost homes. So a horror convention is not going to be their priority, and
Right.
I completely understand that. Um, I think for horror fans today in the UK, the world's your oyster. You've got so much more choice than you've ever had before. So trying to draw in fans to Weekend of the Dead has not been easy. Um, and for the 9 years we've been running, last year when we ran the show, I sort of asked the crowd, is this anybody's first time here at Weekend of the Dead? And amazing, I was so shocked. Over half the room put their hands up saying this was the
Wow.
first show they'd ever been to. And what you have to remember is Weekend of the Dead doesn't attract thousands of fans. It attracts a couple of hundred a day. So it's not a huge convention, but I never wanted it to be anything other than a success within its own. I wouldn't want 1,000 people walking out the door because coming up the stairs because we wouldn't be able to cope and people wouldn't enjoy it the way they enjoy it.
Right.
If you've got thousands of fans turning up to a venue, that means you're limited time in a queue, you're limited time in a photo shoot, limited time to talk to somebody. And Weekend of the Dead was never designed to be that kind of event.
Yeah.
Very
I
cool.
I know you mentioned Tom Savini having been at Sheffield, and he's one of those people that, especially I think for huge horror super fans, this is their chance to actually have a real conversation with him because of that time. Like I was stuck in an elevator, not stuck in an elevator, I was in an elevator with him, so you get the chance to actually chat. Because he's gone to several, and I know he loves it. He talks about how great it is. How did you end up making that connection happen?
It's a really good question. I mean, obviously, each and every one of the guests that we've ever had across has had a unique connection with us as a team. I mean, obviously, I'm the face, I get up on the stage and do things, but there is such a big team that's behind all of it. So I suppose I build up the relationships with people. And so meeting so I met Tom Savini obviously at one of the at the Weekend of Horrors in Germany, and he could tell that obviously we were fans. You often get on well with somebody if you're in a foreign country like Germany, for example, because although a lot of Germans speak English, not all of them do. So of course they cotton on your English. We can have a chat, and I know that Tom. Some people have, a great reaction with Tom, and some people, say, "Oh well," and it's just depends really. It just depends on what you're saying to him and how you're interacting with him and what you're showing him. He gets thousands and thousands and thousands of fans talking to him all the time. So how did we get him? I remember when we had done the 2015 show, we had David Crawford and Jim Krut come across, which was lovely. Both of them came across near enough under their own expense, and gave us that foothold. We call them the founding fathers of Weekend of the Dead, which is something very American, isn't it? Very American. And so when we did the 2016 show, we had enough money to bring in not just two people, but I think we ended up with 8 guests in the end, which was amazing. But the other reason we were able to do such a big show that year was because we had fantastic sponsors. I mean, more like donators than sponsors, where they were so invested in what we were doing. They wanted to help financially, just give it that injection because being so small and niche, we hadn't mastered Facebook, we hadn't mastered Twitter, and I don't think Instagram had been around very long at that point, or if it was around at all. So while those relationships were building through 2016, we'd always reached out and said, it would be great to get Tom Savini, but at that time, I don't think I had any contact for him. And I think Jim Krut takes a lot of credit for this. He helped us make so many connections with so many different people. One in particular was Sharon Hill, the nurse zombie. We were able to get her over because of Jim's relationship with Sharon and with a number of other people that we hadn't met in Germany. But with Tom Savini, I remember it very clearly. In 2017, there was a big transition of our backroom people in 2017, quite a bit of upheaval. And one of them was we didn't have an official artist anymore. And so we needed to find somebody that we wanted to bring in that was a big name, that was somebody that I had also met in Germany. And his name was Graham Humphreys. And he's there isn't enough I can say about him. He's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful character. And we were able to talk him into designing an incredible poster for us that we'd never had before, a full-size poster with all the guests on. And we had a Weekend of the Dead meeting at my home, and we'd gathered everybody here, including Graham, to unveil the poster to us and to everybody else. And it was at that gathering here in my home that we had this proper contact with Tom Savini, and Tom Savini committed to Weekend of the Dead for 2017 while we were here all together. There's pictures of us all together. We took loads of pictures because we all got drunk and celebrated the fact that we booked Tom Savini. But the reason we got him was because of the reputation that we built up over 2015 and 16 as being respectful to the guests, that we weren't for profit for ourselves. It wasn't lining our pockets. They could see that they were being made priority. So many other conventions, I mean, I would exclude Sheffield HorrorCon from this because they treat their guests very, very well. But other conventions, maybe let's say not within the UK, they don't always put the guests as their priority. They don't always put the fans as their priority because their priority is about making money. Now, of course, you can't do any event without money. So it's crazy to say that money is important. It's very important, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of the fans. It shouldn't be to the detriment of the guests or your staff, for example. So I think Tom had heard about how good Weekend of the Dead had been in 2016, and I think he wanted a piece of it. I think he wanted to come and experience it for himself. And when we did get him here, oh my God, it was brilliant. It was really, really good. There's a video online, and you probably see, I think it's on our website, where I'm interviewing Tom, and it's just a little 2-minute clip or a minute clip where I go, I'm here, I'm with Tom Savini. And before I could take the next breath, he's got me in a headlock.
Yep.
And he's basically just, shut up. This is a great show. I'll do it anytime, any place, as long as he'll just shut up. So, yeah.
You said it's not, you're one of your guys' goals and things is not about the money as others are. What makes you want to put in the work or able to put in all the work that goes into the convention that you guys are doing? Like, that's got to be, it's got to be a tremendous amount of pressure, work, organization for, like, what are you getting out of that? Like, obviously we've talked about it a little bit, but like, what gets you there?
Chris, it's a very good question. And I've been asked that many a time. Like, I think people are quite shocked when they realise that this is not where we've all got a wage and our mortgage is getting paid for it. People are quite
Right.
shocked that we're not even taking, we don't even take the hotel bills out of our funds that we make for weekend. We don't pay any expenses whatsoever. This is how much we take out a Weekend of the Dead. This is how much. And I'm proud of that. But
Right.
people are shocked. So why do you do it? It's certainly not for my stress levels, that's for sure. You do it because I think my wife is very anti Weekend of the Dead because she's seen how much stress and strain. I touched a little bit on it about 2017 where we had a big transition of team members in 27. I say big, a couple of people. And that when you've got a settled team for a couple of years, it kind of throws you a little bit when you lose some people, especially as you see them as important, integral parts of the team. So when that changes, you're kind of like, oh, that throws you, and you kind of come out fighting a little bit, and you think, right, I'm going to get the best artist, I'm going to get the best I can, But for me, what I got out of it, other than the stress and the worry and the strain and the financials, because financially it hits us individually quite hard. It's a good couple of $1,000. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but it's more than $1,000 and it's less than 2,000 that it cost me to do it myself, to go and pay for my own hotel, to pay for my own food and drink and transport. But that's my choice. So what do I get out of it? The interactions that I have had with all the guests from Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Land of the Dead, The Crazies, every Romero film you can imagine has been first class. There is nothing, the memories I have will live with me forever, and nobody can ever take them away. And it's just, that's what I wanted. When you have that one-on-one moment with a Tom Savini, with a Jim Crop, with a Laurie Cardeal, with a Judith O'Day, there's nothing that can replace that. And we're talking proper private time, proper private conversations where you can talk about anything you want, and we have, and they can see that passion that you're not, as much as I love Halloween and Friday the 13th, this is nothing to do with it. It's all to do with the Romero stuff, and I think they invest in what we're doing because of how invested we are with them as guests and with the films that George created. I actually thought I was alone in liking these films, so I didn't think there was anybody out there, certainly in the UK. I didn't think there was anybody other than a half a dozen people that might like this film, so I was pleasantly surprised.
I know this is a slightly personal question, so feel free to pass them if you want to, but you mentioned having these really beautiful moments with people, and I was wondering if you felt there were any you could share with the audience that were, funny or really touching, or just that you never thought would happen.
There's a couple I can share with you. So I remember each year I do Weekend of the Dead, by the time the show's finished, I suffer so bad with really bad back pain, And I think it's because I'm stressed and you're tense and you're worried. And in particular, 2017, oh my God, we were in the reception at about 6, 7 in the morning on a Monday morning after the show had finished. And I was sat there with Judith O'Day, and I'd bonded with her, as I do with all the guests, to be fair, but particular, her and Laurie and Galen, for example, I bond with those three so well. Judith O'Day, she was going to be going, and we were sat in the reception, and I remember, I think it was Gareth Wright, his partner at the time, and my wife, myself, and a couple of others. And I was moaning about my back, and Judith said, just sit down there, I'll rub it for you. And I'm like, what? She goes, I'll rub it. So I get a back massage from Judith O'Day. Now, I don't care, I could die a happy man. She did a good job. She has strong hands. She did a good job. And I remember when she returned, because obviously we had a great 2017 show with her and Russ Striner. When we did the I want to get this right now, 2022 show, she returned with Judith Ridley. And we talked about this moment on stage, and I was literally sat on the floor, and she went to do the massage for me. That one sticks in my mind a little bit. Another one that sticks in my mind is the 2016 show. The 2016 show, obviously, we'd just got over the fact that we'd learned a lot of lessons from the 2015 show, where it was Talking with the Dead UK TV. First thing, we changed the name because it was a mouthful. We realized that you cannot travel up on the same day that you're doing the event and have a meal and do all the things within 24 hours. And I'm being generous, 12 hours is ridiculous. So when we were coming up in 2016, we had announced at the 2015 show a very special moment. We had Joe Pilato come on the phone. My wife gave me her phone. We plugged it in to the tannoy system, and we let Joe go on this tannoy system, which would, hello, I'm Joe Pilato, Day of the Dead, I'll see you next year. No, nothing simple like that with Joe Pilato. Joe gets on the phone and he's doing some weird, I have no idea what, even to this day, what he was saying. And then he burst into this Winston Churchill speech where he basically said, we'll take them on the beaches, and this is Captain Rhodes, Joe Pilato. And of course, the whole room erupted, and the downside in 2016 was Joe sadly cancelled with about 2 to 3 months to go. He wasn't very well, man, as we know today. He had his demons, and so I've never liked cancellations. And when you get one, you're like, oh God, we're just how can we lose Joe? What can we do? I was in such good friendships with Terry Alexander. I was able to pick up the phone and ring him up and say, look, would you please just come over? We've got Gary Clark here. Would you just please come over? And Terry, word for what he said, you're like family to me. I'll drop everything I'm doing, book me a flight. I'm on my way over. So when Terry came, we got him into our home, and he stayed with me along with Jeannie Jeffries, the blonde zombie from Dawn of the Dead. And we drove up together, Terry and I, up to Manchester. And as we're driving in the car, I'm looking at Terry going, trying to go all the lines with him. I go, Terry, would you say, anything from the film, anything? And of course, all the way up to Manchester, and it's 3 hours in the car. It must have been the longest 3 hours of Terry's life, where he's going, will you just stop asking me to do the lines from the film? But we literally all the way up there, and Terry is a lovely man. He indulged me completely, always, all the way up to Manchester, all the lines from the film. I would just bounce one off him, playing McDermott, or playing Joe. And Terry would just come back at me. And what was amazing about Terry was his memory for the lines. As long as I said it, he was like, boom, boom, boom. Very, very good.
Wow.
I was very, very impressed with him. And the last one I'll leave you with again includes Terry. I said that Jeannie and Terry stayed in my home at the 2016 show. Nearly every show we've ever had, including the first one where I had David and Jim Crutch stay in my house, we've always had some of these guests stay at our home, which is massive for me. It means so much to me, being a fan. So we had Terry stay with us before the show, but when the show was finished, Jeannie and her husband Jimmy came back, and we were having a glass of red wine, and we were having a meal, and Jeannie came up to me and she went, do you think we could get Terry to watch Day of the Dead? And I went, hell yeah, we can. So I went up to Terry and I said, Terry, do you mind if we, do you fancy watching Day of the Dead? And Terry said, sure. And he's such a laid back, he's, to say he brought a lot of his character to John's character in Day of the Dead, I think he did, because that laid back Caribbean style, manana, no problems, he's like that in real life. And he said, yeah, sure. I haven't watched it in years. I think I've watched it 3 times in my entire life. I think something like that. So he sat down in my front room. Jeannie sat there with Jimmy, and literally we put the film on, and I'm thinking, I've never done a Facebook Live. I'm going to do it. So I put Facebook Live, put it on the TV, onto the TV. Day of the Dead comes up. Terry sat next to me, and I'm literally got the camera going, and I'm like, and the reaction we were getting was wonderful. People were like, this is just surreal. It's brilliant. Can you ask Terry a question? And again, I felt so sorry for Terry, because I was like, look, it's Terry, he just kept putting the camera on him. And he must have thought, just get me out of here. Just get me out. But that was lovely. There are just a couple of memories that spring to mind, but I've had lots really funny ones. Really fun. We've had some I say they weren't horrible, they were just awkward moments, but I've had mainly very, very good, very positive, very funny memories of just some wonderful people. George obviously surrounded himself with people that thought the way he did and felt the same way he did about doing a project, for sure.
I love that.
Do you have a favorite Romero film? I mean, is it Day of the Dead, or is there another one that got you kind of into them?
Yeah, no, you're right. As a kid, I was a bit of a scaredy cat. I used to get night terrors when I was a little one. Apparently, my mum and dad told me, and so I used to sleep with the bed covers over my head. So I never really watched any horror films. The closest I got to watching them was in the early '80s. I watched the Hammer House of Horror films. One but one that caught my memory was I think one was Tommy Boy, another one was called The House That Bled to Death. And so I used to creep downstairs when the theme music came on and you could hear it, and my parents would go to bed. But my cousin came to stay with me. I was 13 years of age, and he came from my dad's side of the family that were a bit rebellious. They were allowed to do anything they wanted. They were very free-willed. So he went to the local video store back when you go to a video store to get your films. Walked in, and you've got all the stack of horror films on the shelves. And my cousin goes straight up and grabs the film Zombie Flesh Eaters. It's the most hardest hitting zombie film probably of that time. So I'm like, oh God, right. And my mum's going, oh, we can't have this, because it's no good. And the woman behind the counter said, oh, it's okay. It hasn't got any sex in it, Mrs. Lewis. And my mum went, we'll have it. We'll take it. So Zombie Flesh Eaters was the first hard-hitting film I saw, but it got me interested in the zombie genre. And then I was scouring the video stores and I saw the cover of Dawn of the Dead, with the face on the cover. And when I flipped it over, it had Stephen King's, The World's Gone Crazy. So I watched that age 14, and that blew my mind. I don't think I'd ever seen anything that, I don't know, just got me obsessed for the next 40 years. But Day of the Dead was the film that came out, and I was able to go to a cinema to see it in 1985, 86. I think it was released here in the UK, 85. And I then took my then girlfriend, who is not my girlfriend anymore. When we went to see it, I mean, she was nearly sick as a dog, and I'm at the back going, yes, yes. I lie a little bit about the yay. So I think when I first watched it, I think a lot of Romero fans were kind of confused by the film. It was very dark. It was a lot of talky, sweary. It was nothing like Dawn of the Dead. And a lot of us thought maybe we were going to watch, obviously not Dawn of the Dead again, but something that would spin off from it in one way or another. But Day of the Dead just went to a whole different level. And it took me a couple of years to just realize that this really is my favorite film. So Day of the Dead is just by a nose is my favorite. If I'm pushed, if I have to vote and say, and I think it's only because it's my generation's George Romero film. You probably speak to people that were born in the 50s that would say the 60s Romero film Night of the Living Dead is theirs. People that were born in the 60s might say, well, the George Romero 1978 film Dawn of the Dead is theirs. One thing I can tell you is whenever we run a poll here at Weekend of the Dead or anywhere that I've seen it, Dawn of the Dead just kicks ass. It just beats every Romero film that's ever been produced, and it does it by a country mile.
Interesting.
Like you said, it's a really different and unusual one. Is it because I know that different years you kind of focus on different Romero films. Are the years that you focus on Day of the Dead ones that are particularly sort of like you have to beat the door down with people trying to get tickets?
No, I think most Romero fans love nearly all of them. They're always going to be a particular favorite for somebody. Like I mentioned mine, I remember, I have a lovely memory of a young lad called Charlie Planner who came to our event in 2017. He was 20 or 21 years of age, and he loved the 1968 Night of the Living Dead movie. And he, for a young man, he bought a platinum ticket, which is not a couple of dollars, it's quite expensive. And when he turned up and I got to meet him and chat to him, I realized how much this black and white old movie meant to him. And of course, Judith O'Day and Russ Striner were coming along. So when she turned up, Charlie was in the bar with us, and I'd gone over to meet, and I was all fangirl, like, hi Judith, hi, what more do you want me to say? Hello. And as I was taking her, I booked her into her room, and as I was taking her up to her room, I said to her, "There's a young lad in the bar. He's going to meet you tonight at the very special Friday night meal that we have. He's a platinum ticket holder. He's come to meet you and Russ, and he loves this film, and he's 20 years of age." And she went, "Stop, what?" And she's flown in from Phoenix, so we're talking 15 whatever hours it took. It took forever to get from Phoenix with all the connections to the UK. She said, "I'm going to get my bag in my room. I'm going to put my lippy on, and you're taking me down to meet him." I said, "It's okay. You're going to meet." "No, he's come all this way. I want to see him now."
Oh, wow.
So I literally, I said, "I'll tell you what we're going to do. Stand behind me, and then I'll go to Charlie, and then I'll step to one side, and you're there." And that's exactly what we did. And the only thing we're missing was we didn't have a camera on his face, because I really wish we had, because his face was an absolute picture. And he got this lovely moment where she sat with him and chatted with him. And what was such a humbling, I mean, this is classic Weekend of the Dead. On the Saturday morning, I think it was the Sunday morning, I go down to the breakfast room, and there's Charlie and Judith having breakfast together. It was a goosebump moment. Just like that's what it can give you sometimes.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely one of the pluses, right? Like that's what you're talking about, those individual experiences, not even just for you, but like you can see other people having those just tremendous life, like you'll remember forever experiences.
We've done it for a number, I think what's nice about Weekend of the Dead is I don't know everybody's name, but I have a damn good understanding of probably over half the people that turn up to Weekend of the Dead. I know them by first name, I know them by second name, and you get to know what films are important to them, and overall what's important to that individual. So another example of magic of Weekend of the Dead was we have a fan that comes over from Ireland called Martin Kumsky. He's been with me since we did the very, very first show, as with some of these other people I mentioned. And when he comes over, he just throws himself into the Weekend. He loves it. And Day of the Dead's his favorite film. He's watched it every Friday night since the day it was released. Every Friday night. Wow. That's how big a fan he is. It's massive. There isn't anything that he doesn't know about that film. And one particular year, which was the 2017 year, we had Laurie Cardile, we had Jarlath Conroy, we had Tasso Stavakis, we had John Amplis, and we had, I'm missing somebody. It's going to really annoy me now. Who am I missing? I got the 2017 poster here, so it'll tell me. And we had, no, maybe I'm right. It was 4 or 5 people from Day of the Dead. And we were setting up in the room, and I know Martin was outside and was very excited. And I said to the guys that we were, doing the show with, some of the volunteers. So I said to Mark Burns, a couple of others, so John Leask and that, and Martin, I said, "Go and get him and tell him we need a hand in here to move some tables." Well, of course, we didn't need a hand to move any tables, and we just lined up all the Day of the Dead people to specifically meet him when he walked in through the door. So he literally walked, and we did get this recorded. It got video recorded. He came in, and he was like, "Oh my God, Laurie, it's you, Laurie." And he had that. I mean, it just brings a big smile to my face, and it makes me realize that's why you do it. That's why you do it, because it's why you do it. Yeah, it's brilliant. Brilliant to see those individual moments of people getting that experience that if Weekend of the Dead had never been created, it would have never happened. That They would have never, very unlikely that they would have met him. Not impossible, because if we hadn't created Weekend of the Dead, maybe someone like the Sheffield Horrorcon people would have brought people over from that film. It's almost, it's very possible. But that experience just doesn't happen every day.
Right. And as an adult, when does it happen? If you really think about it, when you're a kid, you can meet, like, I always think of Disney World, right? Like little kids see Mickey Mouse or whoever, and they're just the princesses. We took my daughter when she was 3, and she met the princesses, and like I remember that. She doesn't remember meeting them. She was 3, but like I still remember her face and like just the awe that they have. But like you get less and less of that as you grow older. So like it's actually very cool to think like as an adult, you're providing an environment for these people to have those moments again, because it's very rare.
Yeah, I mean, this was the debate I'd had with my wife many times. Was she was saying, "What are you doing? You've got nothing to prove. Stop that." She said back in 2020, she made this announcement to a number of us without my knowledge in front of me, going, "That's the last show now." And I'm like, "What? It's not what?" And I understood. I knew where she was coming from. I knew, it had been very difficult. Running up to 2020, we'd had many guests across. We had nothing to prove. We were heading into the COVID period. We knew that moving forward would be challenging, and she'd had enough. She had enough, and because obviously she saw the personal side of some of the challenges we'd had. Some of the things that happened to us as a family. She's right in the middle of it all, and so, well, I've lost where I'm going with this. Was trying to think.
Are you telling us why you decided it wasn't the last one? Maybe.
Well, I could do, yeah, probably. I always had in mind. When people tell you that they want you to stop, and they try to make you stop one way or the other, whether it be your wife saying stop or somebody outside influence saying that they don't like what you're doing for one reason or another, then that just motivates me more to go on. When somebody says it's not possible to do this, when we very, very go back to the beginning and say this isn't possible, this is never going to work, I would be like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. We will make it work. Obviously, if we were running it like a proper business, like the event that's running in America, or some of these other horror conventions around us, if we ran it like a proper business where people were getting paid, then it wouldn't work, because there's not enough footfall coming through the door to make it a financial success where everybody can cover their expenses and so forth and so on. It's not that kind of event. But I think that's what makes it special, because can you name many events or any events that run where they don't pay their people? Do you know any? Because I don't know any.
No, that's usually the first thing, that how do I make money on this, and then it stops after that.
I had a very private chat with somebody during not long after the COVID period, because obviously Tracy had announced we're not doing anymore, and in the back of my mind I was thinking, I've got an ace card under my sleeve here, and if I mention just one name to Tracy, she won't be able to say no to me, and that name was Greg Nicotero. So, of course, if Greg had agreed ever to do an event for us, then I know that I could draw Tracy. She would look at me going, but she would know that this is a big name within the whole horror genre, let alone the Romero movies. So when I met up with this team of people that wanted to talk about a different, another part of this zombie genre or horror genre that I was interested in, it was a private meeting, and the first thing they were all talking about was, if I invest this money, I want to make sure I get the money back. And I understand that, completely understand it. But if you're a fledgling show like that, you've got to be able to put some money on the table and be prepared to lose it, because it's very possible. Making money in a horror convention, unless you're going to be one of the big boys and literally throw everything you've got at it, it's not going to work. That's why I sometimes get frustrated with some fans that say, "Oh, I'll come next year. I can't make it this year." No, there may not be a next year. You've got to come this year. If you don't come this year, we could fold. We could fail. And that's happened to us a couple of times, where we've got very, very close, where we weren't being supported for one reason or another. It could have been the guest lines up. I doubt that. It could have been financial reasons for people. Sometimes people buy their tickets last minute. I hate this, because you can't plan anything with that. Right. But you can't hold a gun to people's heads and say you will buy a ticket. But when Tracy did announce, that it was on the Sunday evening, we'd done the 2020 show. Russ Streiner was there, along with John Russo from Night of the Living Dead. Day of the Dead, we had Laurie Cardile there with Terry Alexander and Jarlath Conroy. Brilliant that was. We had a really good lineup for 2020, and I think we'd all got together for a drink in the bar afterwards, and she just literally stood up and did this lovely speech, which I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to give up yet. And so when we got through the COVID period, which was difficult for everybody, I remember secretly planning with the guys and say, look, we've built up a little bit of money over the COVID period selling some autographs and, posters and stuff. And we were able to sort of plan around Greg Nicotero, a 2020 show that, not 2020, sorry, 2022 show that would got us out the other side of COVID. And, we hit the ground running again. And I think the success of the 2022 show was having people like Greg Nicotero and then Tom Savini last year. Tom Savini broke every record we've ever had last year. So this evolution of the show and the way that people do it, what they do at our show is getting stronger, not weaker. Maybe that's not the right word, but they're just moving from strength to strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. And for people who might be listening to this who haven't had the chance to go yet, you touched a little bit on how Friday night there's a special dinner and then there's events on Saturday and Sunday. Would you be able to give like an overview of what we'll expect it's 2nd and 3rd of November, what the days are like, so that if they fancy tickets, they can know what's going to happen?
Well, unfortunately, we've evolved from gold and platinum tickets to just one simple VIP ticket, and they are all sold out. Which it doesn't shock me because the Friday night, as you witnessed for yourself, is a very, very special evening. So the format of the show is we always start the Friday night with our VIP fans, all the guests, all the staff, and my family. We all get together. There's about 40 of us. And we're in the interview room in the hotel, and we have a 3-course meal, and it's just very relaxed, very laid back. Whenever Tom Savini comes, it's always around his birthday. So we all, as you touched on, Lauren, we get to sing happy birthday to Tom Savini. That's something you don't get to do every day. That's happened 3 times for Weekend of the Dead, which is amazing. He didn't do his tradition, which is have his birthday cake naked. I don't know if anybody's heard that tradition that he does on his birthday. My daughter's got spared that, so and then so that's the Friday, and that's quite a really nice, relaxed way, and it's as much for the guests as it is for my team, for our team, I should say, and the fans that get to go to that. It's for the guests as well because they get that nice ease into it. Because some of them have never been before. I need to do a new count upon this, but I think it's between 45 to 50 different Romero guests over the last 9 years we've had over at the show. And considering it doesn't cost $2 or $3, $4 to get each one of these guys over, we've done a lot for the legacy of George Romero in Europe, so that fans in the UK and surrounding countries, as far as Japan has been over to our show, can come and see, and we do things differently to America. And that's just because we have to do things different to America because America's got them all. America's got the airfield, America's got the mine, we've got a hotel. So we have to use our imagination. As you get older, it's a bit harder to use. But yeah, so the Friday evening, obviously is very special. But Saturday, obviously, we open the doors up and, we have interviews going on all day. Obviously, the signings going on all day. We have a brilliant photo shoot area that's really become quite renowned for just doing things differently and being very exciting. An example is we built the wall of hands for Laurie when she came over in 2020. My daughter came up with the idea of, hey, Dad, why don't you build the wall and have people with their arms twiddling out, and we'll put Laurie in the picture with the fan. And I went, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? We did Door of the Dead with Judith O'Day and Judith Ridley, where we had, Scott Kellaway, who's brilliant at his cosplay. He's done, obviously, Flyboy is what he's really well known for, but obviously he's now doing Russ Striner's Johnny, and he literally played the character coming through the door trying to grab at everybody, and we got such an interaction. That's the point. It's the interaction with fans, with the photo shoot, with it's not just that standard stand there and take a picture. It's not always possible to do that every year, but when we get the right ideas and we get the fans behind it, we can do it. So that happens throughout the Saturday. Then the Saturday evening, we have an after show, which basically we have a number. There's about 80 people turn up to that compared to 30 to 40 on the Friday night, and that's sort of generally a 2-course buffet style meal There's still tickets available for that, but not many. And that's a really nice, relaxed evening. Each one of the guests sit on a table independently, and we put fans on tables with them. We often show some, pictures through the day of people's photo shoots and things like on the big screen, and it's a really relaxed, really enjoyable evening. And then Sunday we get to do it all again. And then Sunday evening we all sit looking at each other, feeling quite depressed and down because it's over. So yeah, I always, Sundays are always difficult. I mean, there's a relief because you've got over the line and it's been good and you haven't killed anybody and things have gone well. But there's also that decompression, and obviously you feel a little bit deflated by the end of the day because obviously you've been on that big high and then it's poof and it's stopped, and there's always that concern of, are we going to do next year? Are we going to do next year? Are we going to do next year? And I wasn't sure that 2024 was going to happen. I know my family were not behind it at all. They're not behind it any year, but this particular year, they really aren't behind it at all, which is a real shame. But we made the decision to go for it as we did because we had a very successful 2023 show. It was the most successful show we've ever had, which was fantastic. Because when I think back to the 2018 show, we had 13 guests, a lot of pressure. It was in a big venue, and it worked, but it didn't work. So we went back to our roots and went back to the smaller venue. As a lesson to be learned there, don't run before you can walk. But each time you sort of having a successful show, you're thinking we could do this, we can do bigger, we can do better. And sometimes you just got to keep doing those baby steps. But yeah, that's what fans can expect, is that you're going to be entertained. There's always plenty to see. It's not a big venue, it doesn't hold thousands of people. We hand select our vendors to come in, because obviously we have to explain to them that it's not thousands of people. So even the vendors are pretty much invested in Weekend of the Dead. We have got some Skype interviews going on with it. In particular, Mike Christopher, the Harry Krishna zombie, will be coming up on the big screen through the weekend. He attended the 2016 show. We can't get him back on an aeroplane, sadly. I've tried many times, and he just doesn't want to fly anywhere, which I completely understand. We've got Matt Blasey and Eric Kent, who are two of the craziest Americans for George Romero location tours. They are brilliant. They know their stuff. So we've got those guys coming on over the weekends, doing some chats and talking and doing a bit of Q&A with those guys about some of the places they've been. We've been with them. We took a big group of us out in 2019 to America, where he and Eric took us around all the different Romero shooting locations of Night Riders, Monkey Shines, The Crazies, Dawn of the Dead, of course, and Day of the Dead. So, we love those guys, and they've never been involved with the show other than when we produced a program. They've written something in the program. We've never had them we've always wanted them to come out to the show, but as each and every person that comes out from America realizes that it's an expensive thing to do. But we would love Eric and Matt to come out one day. But this year we've got them on the big screen, so that's good. And we do have American fans come over, which blows my mind. I can't believe when you've got such the ultimate event in the Living Dead weekend in America. It kind of surprises me that anybody would want to come and do Weekend of the Dead. But we have loyal fans, and and when they get to experience Weekend of the Dead, I think they're like, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be.
You're absolutely right. I hope you don't mind saying I have a really good friend, Sean, who lives in America, and she and her husband are going this year. They wouldn't miss it. It's really great. The number of people you meet there and then make friends, but it's so international.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of love for George's films. I mean, considering that the content of the film is such horrible gore and storylines and murdering and just awful. He's such a lovely man, he was a lovely man. Obviously, we lost George 7 years ago. Is the fact that the people he surrounded himself with, work-wise, or his family, are just wonderful people, and the legacy of his films, I think, will continue for a long time. I think that the fan base around them is extremely, very loyal and passionate. sometimes over passionate, but yeah, they're very, they know that single detail. You get anything wrong and they're on you straight away. And, that's the nature of it, but that's passionate fans for you. But yes, I think that we're very lucky with fan base that when they do invest in us, they come from all over the world. We've got them coming in from France, Germany, obviously America, and obviously before the COVID pandemic, we had 3 people come over from Japan, which was like, wow, wow,
cool. Yeah,
that's
very
amazing.
Cool.
That's real loyalty and that's real dedication, which I did not expect. And if I remember rightly, when we did the 2020 show, 2 of the 3 came to that show, and we are literally heading 2 weeks into the point where there was lockdown coming. So I think we were very, 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 very lucky to get away with what we got away with in the 2020 show, because the 2020 show was supposed to be in November, but Tracy was already, my wife was trying to push us away from, let's have a break. And I said, okay, we'll have a break. We won't do November. We'll do March instead. It's only 3 4. So yeah, that was quite funny. Yeah, she wasn't very impressed with me at all. But it is a labour of love, it's and the team of people that have been involved with it from the beginning to the end, whether they've stayed with us or they haven't, each and every one of them has put in, a lot of effort and time and dedication to try and make it work. And something that we all thought was a real gamble, that it probably won't work, but it did work somehow. And I still can't explain how it did, but it did. And we're still finding new people. Oh yeah, I mean, we still find new people, as I mentioned earlier on. Where we said, half the room put their. That blows me up. I mean, where are people hiding? Or, what are we doing wrong? We're obviously, still finding people out there in the internet world where people talk about the algorithms of how you reach people for a particular, you sometimes you miss the people because you're in the wrong area or something, or not hashtagging enough, or I don't really understand it all, to be fair, and it's probably why we're at a snail's pace. I just don't get it. So yeah.
I do have this quick question. I know we're running on our time, but does your family? I know they're not interested in you. They're not behind the fact that you're putting on this convention, but do they like the movies? Do they enjoy watching?
That's a good question. I'll start with my wife, because she was the first one here before the kids got here. So she, although my eldest, Emma, she's been involved with the show. She likes the films. My Tracy, when I met her, she hadn't seen any of the films, and trying to convince her to watch them was quite challenging. So things like The Crow and Interview with the Vampire, she goes, I'm not watching them. I said, watch them, you'll love them. And then she watched them, and now she loves them. So I think she respects them. I wouldn't say she loves them. I think it's more my eldest daughter likes them a lot, and I think my middle daughter probably likes them quite a bit. She was the one that came up with the idea for Wall of Hands.
Okay.
My youngest, she has discovered older horror films now, but I think she wouldn't admit to liking Dawn, Day and Night, but I think she has a secret like for them all. Overall, I think the family tolerate. It's more of a tolerance than it is for liking it.
Right. Okay.
I know that when George passed away, I said, Trace, well, we got to watch. When Joe Pilato, for example, passed away, we watched Day of the Dead, and there's a picture. I've got a picture of the screen, and Tracy's there, and she's messing around with her phone, not really watching the screen, which is sacrilege, really. I mention, I say, obviously, we've obviously lost a number of big people, big characters over the years, and obviously none so bigger than George Romero 7 years ago. But I remember when George Romero passed away, I remember having a conversation with Gary Clark and Marty Schiff. They were the first two, and I think Jim Crut as well, where I picked up the phone and we were in such shock and such sadness. And then I remember when Joe Pilato passed away again, Marty Schiff, Jim Crut, Gary Clark. And the sad thing was when Gary Clark passed away, I couldn't pick the phone up to him. It was him. It was his turn. And he kind of knew it was coming. He kind of confided in me. I say confided like I'm important. It's not. It's the fact he told me what was going on. he'd sent me a few emails, and he was a man that would write letters, and he'd sign an autograph for you at a drop of a hat. Very, very kind of him to do so. Very generous man. And I remember staying at his house before we brought him over at 2016. That was an amazing experience to see him in his own home. But when he passed away, it was very sad. And when we lose any of them, it is sad. And I think where I'm going with this is that whether you go to the Living Dead weekend in America or you do Weekend of the Dead, you should go, because if you say next year or the year after, A, the event may not exist, B, they may not be able to travel, or worse, we lose them, So
Right.
we've got to appreciate them now while we can, because as these films get older and they get older, we get older, the window of opportunity to actually not remember them just as a memory, but as an experience, that window of opportunity is disappearing fast. So what I would say to any fans out there that haven't attended either one of those events, don't delay on it. Do it while you can, because who knows what tomorrow brings.
Yep. Very good point.
That's really true. And that's slightly somber note to end on. So instead, I'm gonna make you
Let's bring
say
it up. Let's
something
bring it up.
funny. So what I'm gonna make you end on, you mentioned how great last year was. It was, obviously I was there. It was an absolutely amazing experience. So why don't you end on what was a really favorite memory, moment, happy joke, something positive from last year to end this segment from last year.
Lauren, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? That's why you've got that big smile on your face. There it is. There it is. There it is. Well, when we do the after show, obviously we always the Saturday after show, we always try and think of something to do, something entertaining, something different. So what have we had in the past? So in 20, we've had a guy play music. We've had what have we had after? We had a guy called the Elvis Dead come along and do his Elvis to Evil Dead thing, and that was brilliant. We've always had something happening at the after show. And this year just gone, 2023, I was like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I thought, hang on a minute. We've got, originally, obviously, we were going to have John Amplas there and Laurie Cardille there. And we thought, do you know what? We can do this cave scene that is about 15, 20 minutes long, where obviously Joe Pilato does, I'm running the monkey farm now, that whole scene where, I think it kicks off with, long range or short range. I can't reach anybody, and I was able to tell to Lauren's partner, Tony, and say, do you want to be involved in this? We need some actors. And he played Steele. And I played Joe Pilato's character, which was an absolute,
Awesome.
Everybody that played a character, I think we all felt it was an honor to do so. As much as we laughed, and that was the important thing, we laughed at each other and we laughed together. It was the way they would have wanted it. And we had Laurie come, because obviously Laurie had cancelled due to illness. She came up on the big screen and played Sarah for us, which was a big surprise. So what we're trying to say in a bad way, there was about 8 to 10 of us playing different characters from Day of the Dead, the cave scene. We'd practiced it. Even though we practiced it, we still cocked it up in places. Technology. But the video of it is online. I'm sure at some point through Weekend of the Dead this year, we will show it to the fans. It was brilliant fun. We laughed. I think the biggest laugh we got, there were 2 big laughs. One was obviously Tony Marden's playing Steele when he does his lines, because he did it in such a way that everybody's like, I wasn't expecting that. But we also had Scott Kellaway playing Dr. Frankenstein. So when he came through but we left him outside of the room so nobody knew he was there. And then he sort of walked in and does his initial lines, everybody just burst out laughing, clapped. It was a perfect moment in time that I wouldn't change for it. The only thing I'd probably change is trying to get Laurie's speaker to work.
Oh,
We were like, you've got to do your line. What line? You just push the speaker. So it was brilliant. And then Tasso, having Tasso there as well. Tasso actually wanted to play one of the characters that has lines. And I went, Tasso, you're going to be your character. He just lays on the bench with a big spliff out of his mouth and does And do you know what? To be fair to Tasso, he did it and he had a great laugh. There's a lovely photograph of all of us together on stage, pointing the gun and doing, all sorts of it. Nobody, I think there was probably about half a dozen people in the entire room of 80 people that knew what was coming. So we put the big Day of the Dead music, and we all just come walking through in character. I literally zoned out and became Rhodes with the big guns and just looking at people, eyeballing them. It was just brilliant, and people were entertained, and that's what makes Weekend of the Dead different, because you're just not going to get that anywhere else. Maybe I'm wrong, but it was just brilliant. And I hope wherever Joe and Gary are, they laugh their asses off. I hope Dr. Frankenstein, he I'm sure he laughed his ass off. Richard Liberty laughed his ass off too. Yeah, I think particularly Joe Pilato and Gary would have loved it, but if they had been alive and had been there was no way me and Tony would have been playing those parts. They'd have been up there doing it themselves. 100% they'd have been doing it themselves. So yeah, it was a brilliant moment. I'm glad you brought it up, Lauren, because I think for you and Tony, that was a big highlight for you guys.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's incredible, and like you said, it was so much fun. I'm gonna make sure I do that. I know it's up on Facebook, so I'll pop that link up on our YouTube channel, and we'll share it on our Facebook so that everyone can have a chance to see it. But it's one of those other little moments that make Weekend of the Dead so special. I'll remember it the rest of my life.
Yeah, there's normally tears by the end of it, and normally they're happy tears. So yeah, it is great. But there's going to be a couple of little surprises we hope for this year's show. I don't like giving anything away, but just that, be there or just don't be there then, but you're going to miss out. So just be there.
Just be there. Yeah.
That is the perfect thing to end on. Just be there. Do it. Thank you so much, Marcus. We loved having you on. I know we held you a little bit longer, but we just couldn't help ourselves. And if you haven't got your tickets yet, it sounds like they're running out fast. So do it. Just be there. We'll see you next time.
www.weekendofthedead.uk. That's where you can get your tickets.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll make sure to flash that up as well on the thing so everyone can write it down. And thank you so much, Marcus. We've had the best time.
Thank you to you, Lauren, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thank you to the team of people that support Weekend of the Dead, David Berman and all the guys that help out. You know who you are. You make it work. Thank you.
It's amazing. And thank you so much, listeners. Hopefully we'll see you at the Weekend of the Dead.
If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, please head to our Facebook or YouTube pages. We're grateful to Cucurbit, who made our music. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time for the London Horror Movie Club.